Hello, Darklings. Another top 10 list. So I had already done a teen vampires video, and as I mentioned in that video, there are many top 10 lists I can do on vampires, and I'd have to break them up into subcategories. So this one's more old school vampires, as in those hoity-toity, vaguely pretentious little twats that we love so much for being ridiculously pretentious, basically. So most of these are a little unconventional, some you've heard of, and some maybe not. So the first on this list is Innocent Blood. Now this is a John Landis film from 1991, and it's following this French vampire who seduces people and then leaves bodies, and then there's a mobster who accidentally gets turned into a vampire. This movie has a lot of odd humor in it because that's what John Landis likes to do when he does horror movies. Just look at an American Werewolf in London. So it's kind of unconventional. And while the main vampire in it isn't necessarily as old school as others, uh, it has this feel about it that speaks of an older generation. And there's definitely an age feeling to the vampire. So I thought that was definitely worth adding to this list. Next one up on here, which is not easy to find right now. It'll be on DVD next month, which is What We Do in the Shadows, which is a New Zealand mockumentary comedy. Oh my goodness, it took me a while to hunt down and be able to watch it, but I'm definitely going to buy the DVD when it's out. But I don't know what I expected. That was just fantastic, and I highly suggest getting around and watching it. Like I said, it's not on DVD until like mid-May. So until then, if you can find a way to watch it, that's awesome. Because you have a bunch of vampires that are all living together in New Zealand and trying to adjust to modern life, and it doesn't exactly pan out. Plus, Peter is just great. He just stares and looks like the vampire from the TV movie Salem's Lot, which is great. Next one on here is Kiss of the Damned. Now, this one was kind of overlooked, admittedly for good reason. It's not necessarily all that good, but it has a lot of attention and a lot of callbacks to 1970s vampire films. So it's a little bit ridiculous, and the plot is not as strong as it should be. But this only came out a couple of years ago and kind of comes across as a 70s B movie. It's all pretty and dramatic and fancy schmancy, which, is usually a bonus in vampire films. So if you can find it, I definitely suggest taking a look at it. It's not quite as good as some of the others on this list. Next one is Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992 with Winona Ryder and Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins, and this movie is great. Now, what's upsetting is that this adaptation is the one that is closest to the book, which is impressive because it's not very close to the book at all. I'm not sure why it's so difficult for filmmakers to make the book into a film, because it's written in a way that makes it surprisingly not difficult, but anyway, I appreciate the fact that there was a lot of old school film tricks used instead of digital effects. I appreciate the costuming is absolutely mind-blowingly gorgeous, and the acting's solid, and the music's good. It's a lot of fun, and it definitely has that old school vampire romanticism thing going for it, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. The next one that I have is the 1979 version of Nosferatu, The Phantom of the Night by Werner Herzog, with Klaus Kinski as Count Dracula. This is a very interesting, very pretty type of film. It's very dramatic, and it is a remake of the 1922 silent film, but it's kind of odd in that they knew that Dracula had fallen into public domain, and they were able to use the original character names instead of the fake names that they used in the 1920s version, which had a big legal battle attached to it, which I can go on about because I still think it's funny. So this film was filmed in both English and in German. I've only seen the German version with English subtitles. As far as I know, they are both equally good, and there's very little difference between the two of them. So if you're lazy and you just want to watch it in English, do so. So that's definitely worth the watch. The makeup's very creepy. It's very atmospheric. The woman who plays Mina is very pretty. It's a very interesting film, and I was hesitant to watch it because it's a remake, but in some ways it is superior to the original, namely in that they had a budget and were not doing it illegally. But speaking of Nosferatu, the next one I have is Shadow the Vampire with Eddie Izzard and names that are escaping me right now. Sorry, I can't remember all the names off the top of my head sometimes. Now, this is about the filming of the original Nosferatu. It's very odd. It's mostly fiction, but some of the things that they cover in the film did happen. Little bits here and there. The makeup's pretty good, the acting's good. It's a very interesting movie, and I'm glad that I found it, and it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet. So, another Dracula film, which is the 1979 version of Dracula with Frank Langella that is based off of the 70s stage revival play. It's very atmospheric, dark, and moody. Originally, the film was supposedly not as washed out as it is today, but it looks just goth-friendly. Like, holy shit. Just the atmospherics, the costuming, the makeup, all of it is just so spooky. It just looks like a Bauhaus concert. It's kind of impressive. And it's definitely worth a watch. For some reason, not as many people have seen this one, which is odd. Sometimes it's difficult to find, but not that hard. But if you haven't seen that yet, I highly suggest it. It is one of my favorite Dracula films. Now, one of my other weird all-time favorite vampire films is The Hunger with Catherine Deneuve, whose name I can never pronounce because I'm bad at French. David Bowie and Susan Sarandon. Now, this is based off of a science fiction novel from the early 80s, and it's one of those pretentious vampire movies that never says the word vampire, even though it's very clearly that's what it is. It's directed by Ridley Scott's younger brother, Tony Scott. It's very artsy, a little bit pretentious, and the opening 15 minutes are some of the gothest shit I've ever seen, which is great. The acting is good. The age effects for David Bowie, done and supervised by Dick Smith, are really great, and everything's all pretty and fabulous and artsy. It's a little pretentious, it's a little ridiculous, but it's also wonderful, and I love it. Now, a newer one, which I absolutely adore, and apparently I had been waiting so long for this to come out. When it did come out, it was everything I ever wanted and more, which is Only Lovers Left Alive with Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston and Anton Yelchin and Mia Wasikowska? I can never remember how to pronounce her name. Anyway, Jim Jarmusch is one of New York's original no-wave filmmakers from the early 80s. And he's a weird guy who managed to make all these low-budget, odd little films and then somehow ended up making one of the most European films I've ever seen by an American. And it's great. It's beautiful. It's great. The atmosphere is fantastic. The mood is fantastic. The chemistry between Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston is wonderful, and if you haven't seen it yet, you must, because I love it so much. And the number one spot, and one of the most classic out of the ridiculous vampire section of frills and lace, would have to be Interview with the Vampire. Now, yes, the book is much better. I have read the first 4 books. I need to finish reading all the Anne Rice books I have. But I do like Interview. It is well done. It is a lot closer to the book than Queen of the Damned. I like Queen of the Damned because it's my favorite kind of trash. Queen of the Damned is nothing like the book, really. If you're going for accuracy, don't go for that. If you're going for music, do go for that. Interview with the Vampire is a lot of fun. It does have high quality budget Hollywood nonsense, and Neil Jordan is a weird guy. That's one of the few Kirsten Dunst movies I like, because I thought she did really, really well as Claudia. It's probably the only Tom Cruise movie I like, because I'm not keen on Tom Cruise. And even though I do think he isn't Lestat, he did do well. I am in agreement that it's a shame that this film was not able to be made 15 years earlier, when Rutger Hauer would have made a much better Lestat, but oh well, nothing you can really do. So, if you haven't seen anything on this list, I highly suggest doing so, and I hope that you like these movies as much as I do. Till next time, Darklings.